My name is Natalie Parker. I'm 34, and for 5 straight summers the first let my uncle humiliate me in his own backyard. This year he raised a champagne glass in front of 40 relatives and said, "Since you're still playing computer games for a living, sweetheart, I'll offer you an entry-level receptionist spot. Everyone needs charity somewhere." My cousin Tyler laughed and shouted, "Let's start a fundraiser for the IT girl." The whole lawn laughed with him. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just smiled and checked my watch. What none of them knew was that the $2 billion company they were mocking had, 6 weeks earlier, quietly bought the controlling stake in the very corporation my uncle had just bragged about acquiring. On paper, the man calling me a charity case now worked for me. And in about 4 minutes, a helicopter was going to land on his perfect green lawn. Stay with me. You'll want to see his face. The house on Dorchester Street had 3 bedrooms for 5 people, and the radiator in mine banged like someone knocking to get in. My father, Daniel Parker, wired houses for a living, other people's houses bigger than ours, and he came home smelling like copper dust and sweat. My mother worked 2 shifts at Kearney Hospital, days at the reception desk, nights restocking supply carts, so we could keep the insurance. I did homework at the kitchen table under a bulb that flickered when the dryer ran. Every June, we drove 40 minutes to my Uncle James's house in Wellesley for what he called the family summer gathering. The lawn alone was bigger than our whole block. There was a pool with a slide, a cabana with a bar, and a housekeeper named Rosa who set the tables with cloth napkins folded into triangles. My cousins wore things with little polo horses stitched on the chest. I wore my mother's old blouses, taken in at the seams so they'd fit. I was 12 this summer. My uncle decided where I would eat. "Natalie, sweetheart, why don't you sit out on the porch?" he said, steering me by the shoulder before I'd even said hello. His hand was heavy, the way a hand is heavy when it's used to moving things without asking. "The good table's full, and I don't want anyone spilling on you." He smiled when he said it, like it was a kindness. There was a small folding table already set up out there, a card table with one wobbly leg, a single paper plate waiting on it like he'd known I'd need it. I sat down. Through the screen, 40 relatives laughed, glasses clinking, someone's speaker playing music I couldn't place. My cousin Tyler, 9 years old then, pressed his face to the mesh. "Are you the charity kid?" he asked. He wasn't cruel yet. He was just repeating something he'd heard. Later that night, I heard my uncle say it plainly to his golf friend, gesturing toward the porch with his wine glass. "That's my brother's family. Good people. We help out where we can. Every family's got its charity case." The friend laughed. Ice clinked in a glass. I sat very still and made sure my face didn't move. I was 12. I understood every word. I didn't cry in front of anyone. I waited until we got in the car, and my father gripped the wheel at 10 and 2 the whole drive home, jaw tight, saying nothing. I watched the streetlights slide across his face, one after another, and neither of us said a word until we pulled into our own driveway. That silence taught me something before I had language for it. Some debts get paid in quiet. Sitting on that porch, with a paper plate going soft with condensation, I made a decision. I would build something so large it would never fit inside his definition of me. I didn't know it yet. I just knew it had to be mine, something he couldn't touch or explain away with a wave of his glass. By 16, I was teaching myself Python from library books because South Boston High didn't offer it. By 18, I had a full ride to MIT, tuition, room, board, the whole weight of it lifted off my parents' shoulders in one acceptance letter. My mother read it out loud in the kitchen twice, like she didn't trust it the first time. At MIT, I met Lucas Chun in a systems security seminar. He corrected the professor's whiteboard diagram on the second day of class, quietly, without raising his hand, just walked up and fixed it. I liked that he didn't need permission to be right. We started Parkerchin 4 years later in an apartment in Somerville with black mold behind the refrigerator and a landlord who wouldn't fix it. We ran payroll for our first 3 employees off my credit card for 2 months. "You sure about this?" Lucas asked me once, staring at the mold stains shaped like Florida. "We could just get real jobs." "We have real jobs," I said. "They just don't pay yet." When a firm offered us $30 million for the company's 6 years in, Lucas and I sat on his fire escape and talked it through for exactly 1 hour. Say no, he said finally. Already typing it, I said. We knew what we were building. We didn't know yet how big it would get. I never told my family any of it. Not the funding rounds, not the Fortune 500 contracts, not the year we crossed $1 billion in valuation. I let them believe what they wanted because the alternative meant explaining myself to people who'd already decided who I was on a porch when I was 12. This year I was driving back to Wellesley again. In my bag, next to my laptop, was an envelope I'd spent 6 weeks preparing. The lawn behind the Wellesley estate smelled like cut grass and warm champagne. I counted 11 white tents before I stopped counting. James stood on the flagstone terrace with a microphone he didn't need, tapping it twice. Can I get everyone's attention for just a moment? Conversations died in waves, starting near him and rippling outward until even the string quartet by the pool paused mid-phrase. As most of you know, he said, I closed on Hartwell Industries 3 weeks ago. He let that sit, scanning the crowd like he was checking who'd flinched. Manufacturing logistics, 4,000 employees. This isn't some app somebody coded in a garage. This is a real empire. Bricks. Payroll. Steel. Someone near the bar laughed the way people laugh when they're supposed to. I stood near the hedge with a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, watching my uncle's face catch the light exactly the way it had at every summer party since I was a child, chin lifted, eyes moving across the crowd to make sure everyone was watching him watch himself. Natalie. He found me. Come up here. I didn't want to. I went anyway, because not going would have been its own kind of scene, and I'd learned a long time ago that my uncle preferred an audience for both his generosity and his cruelty. Everybody knows my niece runs some computer company up in Boston, James said, an arm landing heavy across my shoulders.
Cyber something.
I've been telling her for years, if she ever wants real experience, real structure, there's a front desk position opening at Hartwell. Entry level. But it's a foot in the door. He squeezed my shoulder. That's the kind of thing family does for family. The crowd made a soft, approving murmur, like he'd just announced a scholarship. I felt the shape of the envelope through the leather of my bag, 6 feet away, sitting on a patio chair. I smiled instead. That's generous, Uncle James. Isn't it? Tyler stood up from his lounge chair, drink already sloshing over the rim of his glass. 31 years old, and somehow still built like every summer he'd spent doing nothing had been a full-time job. Actually, hold on, I have an idea. He raised his glass toward the tent. We should start a little fund. A GoFundMe for the IT girl. He grinned at me, delighted with himself. Help Natalie get on her feet. I'll seed it with $50. The laughter this time was real, rolling across the lawn in a way that made the string quartet start playing again, just to have something to do. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, Brianna, mimed dropping a bill into my champagne flute. For the cause, she said, and 2 people near her nearly choked laughing. I let it happen. I didn't argue, didn't blush, didn't reach for the flute to stop her. I have had a lot of practice standing in the exact center of a room while people decide, out loud, what I'm worth. My phone buzzed against my hip. I didn't look at it yet. I kept my eyes on James, who was watching me with the particular satisfaction of a man who believes he's just been kind. Then I checked it. 1 line from Lucas. Wheels up. 20 minutes. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked at my uncle.
Thank you, I said.
That's very thoughtful of you, Uncle James. I'll think about it. Something in his face shifted, just barely. A half-second stall, like a man expecting resistance and getting agreement instead, and not knowing what to do with the extra weight of it. He recovered fast, patted my shoulder twice like closing a deal, and turned back to the crowd to talk about Hartwell's 4th quarter projections. I walked back toward the hedge. My hands weren't shaking, and I noticed that, the way you notice a light staying on in an empty room. For a long time I'd assumed a moment like this, 22 years of being called the charity case, delivered again in front of caterers and cousins, and a man refilling shrimp cocktail, would finally break something loose in me. Instead I stood very still, watching my uncle finish his sentence, and thought, not yet. Not for another 20 minutes. 20 minutes. If the helicopter left the Boston pad now, it would clear the tree line above the estate right around the time James finished his second story about Hartwell.
Net så videnskapelig.
Emma's hand closed around my wrist before I saw her coming. 28, still in the blue cardigan she'd worn straight from a hospital shift, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of party made disappear. She didn't smile. She glanced once over her shoulder toward the terrace, where Tyler was now performing an impression of someone answering phones. Parkerton Cybersecurity, please hold, please hold. To another burst of laughter. Walk with me, Emma said, already pulling me past the pool house, toward the shadowed side of the property where the caterers' vans were parked and no one would think to look for either of us. Her fingers were cold against my skin, tighter than the moment called for. Emma, what? Don't do anything yet. Her voice dropped low, urgent, close to my ear. Whatever you're planning, and I know you're planning something, I saw your face when your phone buzzed, just wait. She pulled me the last few steps into the shade behind the house, out of sight of the terrace, and turned to face me. There's something about Tyler you need to know first. The kitchen was cooler than the terrace, all white marble and the low hum of a wine fridge. Emma didn't let go of my wrist until the swinging door settled shut behind us. Emma, whatever this is, Tyler's been pulling money out of your uncle's investment account. She said it flat, like a nurse reading vitals.
Not his own account.
James's. I set the envelope I'd been carrying down on the counter, next to a tray of deviled eggs nobody had touched. How much? I don't know the total yet. I know about 4 transfers. Emma pulled her phone from the pocket of her sundress, thumbed to her photos, and turned the screen toward me. He used my laptop back in April. Said his was in the shop. He forgot to sign out of the brokerage portal. The screenshot showed a transfer confirmation. A 5-figure sum, moved from an account labeled JP Family Trust to a personal checking account ending in 40471. Tyler's initials sat on the authorization line, and the date stamp in the corner read April 14th, the first one, Emma said. The transfers hadn't stopped there. The most recent had gone out just 11 days ago, days before this party was even set up on the lawn. Gambling, Emma said, before I could ask. There's a sportsbook app on his phone. He doesn't think anyone's noticed. He told me about it once, drunk, at Christmas. Laughed about it. Like it was cute. Why are you showing me this now? I said.
Tonight.
Right before. I stopped myself. Emma didn't know about the helicopter yet. Nobody did except Lucas and the pilot. Because you're about to do something out there. Emma leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and for the first time all summer, she looked tired instead of pleasant. I don't know what, but Tyler's up there right now bragging about a charity fund like he's some kind of philanthropist, and he's stealing from his own father to cover blackjack losses. I'm done watching this family perform for each other. You could sell this story for real money, I said.
To him.
To your dad.
To me.
I don't want money, Natalie. Her voice cracked just slightly on my name. I want somebody in this family to stop pretending everything is fine. Do you know what it's like being the good one? The one who shows up, who remembers birthdays, who gets told, "You're so sweet, Emma," right before they hand the real inheritance conversation to Tyler? I've been furniture in this house since I was 9. I hadn't known that. 22 years of summers, and I'd never once asked Emma what it cost her to stay kind in a house built on comparison. I have 3 more saved, she said. 4 screenshots total, on a drive at my apartment. Dates, amounts, account numbers, all 4 transfers. I wasn't going to say anything. Then I watched Tyler try to auction off your dignity for laughs an hour ago, and something in me just... She exhaled through her nose. I'm done. Outside, through the window over the sink, I could see the caterers wheeling a dessert cart across the lawn, its wheels catching on the seam between patio stone and grass. Somewhere past them, past the hedge line, a black SUV idled at the edge of the property. My phone, the whole point of tonight, 6 weeks of preparation folded into 1 envelope and 1 flight plan. None of it had accounted for this. I had built tonight around 1 kind of truth, mine. Emma had just handed me a second kind, tangled up in the first, and now I couldn't unhook them from each other even if I wanted to. If I use what you just told me, I said slowly, tonight in front of everyone, it doesn't just land on Tyler. It lands on your uncle.
Publicly.
In front of us, in front of the Hartwell board contact he invited to show off. I know who Gerald Voss is. Emma almost smiled. I know exactly what I'm handing you. I studied her face for the calculation I was used to seeing on everyone else at these parties. The angle, the ask, the eventual price. It wasn't there. Just the particular stillness of someone who has finally decided which side of a line she's standing on. Thank you, I said, and meant it more than I'd meant anything I'd said on that terrace all day. My phone buzzed against the marble counter. I glanced down, expecting Lucas's countdown. It wasn't Lucas. Dad, the screen read. I picked it up, and my father's voice came through fast, tighter than I'd heard it in years. Natalie, before you do anything tonight, there's something about your Uncle James and me you need to hear first. I stepped into the mudroom, phone pressed to my ear, the screen door still swinging behind me.
Dad, slow down.
What about you and Uncle James? He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing, and somewhere behind him, the low murmur of a television he wasn't watching. Sit down first, he said. I'm standing in your brother's mudroom holding a phone. Just tell me. 20 years ago, he said, your mother and I almost lost the house on Dorchester Street. I'd been out of work for 4 months. The bank sent a letter, 30 days to cure or they'd start foreclosure. I didn't tell you. You were 14. I leaned against a shelf lined with garden clogs that cost more than my father's monthly mortgage payment used to be. I went to James, he said. I asked him for $11,000. 11,000. I did the math without meaning to what that was to James now, what it was to my father then. Rent for 1 summer week at this house versus a house. He gave it to me, my father said. Wrote the check right there at his kitchen table. And then he made me sign something. A promissory note. Full amount 6% interest, but that wasn't the part that mattered. What was the part that mattered? He kept the original. Told me, and I remember the exact words, Natalie, I've never forgotten them, he said. This way we both know where you stand with me. The mudroom smelled like cedar and pool chlorine. Through the wall, I could hear music start up outside, something with a string section, the kind of song that plays while people who have never worried about a mortgage eat shrimp off ice. I paid him back in 4 years, my father said. Every dollar plus interest. But he never gave me the note. Every summer, every dinner, every time he called your mother's job at the hospital admirable in that voice, I let it go. Because somewhere in a drawer in his study there was a piece of paper with my signature on it, and I never knew if he'd use it. I didn't know how. I just knew he could. I closed my eyes. That's why you never said anything. All those years. I was ashamed, he said simply. Not of the loan. Of needing it. And I didn't want him holding that over you too. I thought about the envelope sitting in my bag on the seat of my car, 6 weeks of preparation folded into cardstock. I thought about Lucas, already 15 minutes out, checking his watch in a leather seat 11,000 feet above the Mass Pike. Here was the plan I'd built. James goes down in front of everyone at the height of the party, with witnesses. But a man who believes my father still owes him something reaches, in his last seconds of power, for whatever he still holds. He'd say it in front of the caterers, the cousins, the guy from the country club board. My father's worst year, read aloud like a punchline. I hadn't known the receipt existed. I'd built 6 weeks of planning on the idea that James's contempt came from nothing but ego. Now I understood there was paper behind it, and my father had carried that paper, silently, since I was 14. My thumb was already on Lucas's contact. I typed 4 words. Hold the helicopter. I didn't send it. Because through the window over the sink, I could hear another voice now, layered under the string quartet, Tyler's, pitched loud and performative, the cadence of a man talking to a camera. So, classic Uncle Danny, right, working man's pride. My dad basically had to drag him to the good school district. I moved to the window. Tyler stood near the pool with his phone held at chin height, ring light clipped to the case, angled just right. Comments scrolled up the screen I couldn't read but could hear him reading, laughing at them, feeding off them. He still drives the same truck from, 2004. It's kind of iconic, not gonna lie. My father's voice was still in my ear, quieter now. Natalie? You still there? I'm here, I said. I watched Tyler pan the phone toward the deck where my father stood near the drinks table, awkward in a blazer that didn't fit right, unaware he was content. Something in me went very still and very clear, the way it used to right before I hit send on a bid Lucas, and I couldn't afford to lose.
Dad, I said.
I'm not calling anything off, but I'm going to do it different than I planned. Nobody reads that note out loud tonight. Nobody laughs at you again. I promise you that. Natalie, what are you? I love you. I'll explain everything in an hour. I hung up before he could argue, slid the phone into my pocket, and walked back out through the screen door. I stepped onto the lawn, my eyes lifting to the sky in the west. A dark shape was growing larger, and with it, the beat of rotor blades was growing clearer. I did not turn to watch it.
Not yet.
I walked instead toward the bar, where a man in a cream linen jacket was refilling a glass of Sancerre with hands that trembled slightly, the way old money hands sometimes did when the ice ran low. Gerald Voss, Lucas had briefed me, back in the office 3 days ago. Hartwell board. James flew him in from Chicago just to watch him gloat. I had never met Voss. But Voss's fund had signed the confidentiality agreements 6 months ago, the ones with my name buried on page 40, under the holding entity, under the trust, under 3 layers of paper that even James's lawyers hadn't bothered to peel back. I ordered a club soda. The bartender, a kid who couldn't have been more than 19, handed it to me without looking up. Voss turned to reach for a napkin, and his eyes landed on me. I watched the recognition happen in real time. First a flicker, polite, automatic, the look you give a stranger you might have met once. Then it caught. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The color went out of his face the way water leaves a sink, fast, all at once, down some drain I couldn't see. Miss Parker, he said. Not a question. He said it the way you'd say a name you'd only ever read in a signature block at the bottom of a wire authorization, with the strange, formal care of someone meeting a signature in person for the first time. Then he did something that made 2 women near the shrimp table stop talking mid-sentence. He bowed his head. A small, precise inclination, the kind men like Voss reserved for judges and cardinals and, apparently, me. I didn't expect to see you here, he said, low, urgent. I thought, this is James's family event. I didn't realize you were. He stopped himself, glanced sideways, lowered his voice further. I should have connected the surname sooner. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, Mr. Voss. I kept my voice at room temperature. Enjoy the party. But he didn't move. He stood there, glass sweating in his hand, looking at me like a man doing arithmetic he didn't want to finish. That was when James arrived. He came across the terrace the way he crossed every room he'd ever owned, chest first, drink already refilled, a joke dying on his lips because he'd noticed the wrong person laughing. He saw Voss's bowed head. He saw me standing there in a plain navy dress that cost less than the tablecloth behind me. And something in his face soured. Gerald. James's voice carried, the way it always did, pitched for an audience, even when addressing one man. What in God's name are you doing? Bowing to the help. A few heads turned. Not many. Most of the lawn was still occupied with champagne and small talk, but enough. Enough for the words to land somewhere and stay. Voss straightened. He didn't laugh it off. That was the first wrong note, the first thing that didn't fit the song James was trying to play. James, I think there's been some confusion about who. She's my niece, James said, waving a hand at me the way you'd wave at a stray cat that had wandered onto the porch. Nice girl. Runs some kind of computer outfit with her college roommate. I'm setting her up with a front desk rollover at Hartwell. Actually, get her out of that little apartment she shares. He chuckled, inviting Voss to chuckle with him. Entry level. Good place to start. Voss did not chuckle. He looked at me, then at James, then back at me, and something in his jaw tightened like a man trying to hold a door shut against wind that was clearly winning. James, he said carefully, do you know the name of the fund that closed on your Hartwell minority tranche in April? The question sat there in the warm air between them, small and ordinary sounding, the kind of thing you'd ask about a spreadsheet. But I saw James's face change. Not understanding, not yet. Just the first prickle of a man realizing he was standing on ground he hadn't surveyed. Some holding company, James said, impatient now. Meridian something. My lawyers handled it. Why does that? Meridian Sentinel Partners, boss said. He was looking at me when he said it. I said nothing. I let the silence do what silence does best, sit there, heavy, until someone else felt compelled to fill it. James opened his mouth. Whatever he was about to say, a dismissal, a joke, another wave of the hand, never made it out, because the ground shook. Not metaphorically. Actually shook, a low bass thrum traveling up through the slate of the terrace and into the soles of my shoes, rattling the ice in every glass on the bar. Tablecloths lifted at their corners like they were breathing. Someone's Panama hat sailed off the head of a man near the rose hedges and cartwheeled across the grass, and above the tree line at the western edge of the property, a shape was dropping out of the sky, fast and black and getting louder by the second. The Bell 429 touched down 40 feet from the caterer's tent, and grass whipped flat in a circle around it like something being erased. Beyond the pool, the row of catering vans parked along the back drive rocked slightly on their shocks from the wash, and two servers dropped their trays and just stood there, hands still raised, staring. Lucas ducked out from under the slowing blades with a leather portfolio under one arm, wearing the gray suit he saved for board meetings. He didn't smile at anyone. He walked straight to me across the slate terrace and handed me the portfolio, and under the wind noise he said, "Just for me? You sure?" "Will's up already happened," I said. "We're past sure. Legal's going to want a statement ready by Monday," he said lower. Hartwell's still inside the SEC review window. "This isn't the venue I'd have picked." "It's the venue he picked," I said and turned around. 200 people had gone completely still. James stood by the bar cart with a glass of scotch tipped halfway to his mouth, frozen there. Tyler had his phone raised, still filming. I could see the little icon in the corner of his screen from 10 feet away, a number climbing, some feed he'd started an hour ago to show off the party to people who weren't invited to it. Emma stood near the hedge line with her arms crossed, and when I caught her eye, she gave me one small nod, the kind you give someone before they step off a ledge you already know is safe. My father stood a few feet behind her, a drink he hadn't touched sweating in his hand, watching me the way he used to watch me climb the maple tree in Dorchester, ready to catch me and hoping he wouldn't need to. "I want to thank my uncle," I said, and my voice carried fine without shouting, "for the offer this afternoon. The receptionist position. I've thought about it, and I'm going to have to decline." Someone laughed, uncertain, testing whether this was still a joke. "My company is called Parkerton," I said. "Lucas and I started it in a one-bedroom in Somerville with black mold in the bathroom ceiling. 14 years ago. As of our last valuation in March, it's worth $2.1 billion. We handle cybersecurity infrastructure for 60% of the Fortune 100. I opened the portfolio. Inside was a single laminated sheet, a client list, and I read 6 names off it into the quiet. A bank, 2 airlines, a hospital network, a defense contractor, a name that made a woman near the hedges actually gasp. "Mr. Voss can confirm the last one," I said and looked at him. Gerald Voss, still holding a drink he hadn't touched in an hour, nodded once. His hand wasn't steady. "It's accurate," he said. "All of it." James set his glass down on the bar cart hard enough that ice jumped. "This is, Natalie, this is a very elaborate prank, and I have to say, it's not a prank." I nodded to Lucas, who tapped his tablet, and the screen mirrored onto the 70-inch television someone had wheeled poolside for the Sox game earlier. It wasn't the Sox anymore. It was an ownership chart, clean boxes, and thin connecting lines, the kind of diagram I'd stared at alone in my office at 2 a.m. until the boxes stopped looking like anything at all. "This is Hartwell Industries," I said, tapping the top box, "which you closed on April 26. Congratulations, by the way. 4,000 employees, real assets, real revenue. A real company." I let that sit half a second. "This is the holding structure underneath it." I dragged my finger down the chart. 3 boxes down, one label, Meridian Strategic Partners, Parker Chen LLC, Managing Member. Meridian is a fund Lucas and I set up 18 months ago. It's been acquiring a controlling position in Hartwell's parent since January. Quietly, through 3 intermediary entities, because that's how you do it without spooking the seller or triggering a bidding war. I looked at James directly for the first time since I'd started talking. You didn't buy an empire, Uncle James. You bought 41% of one. I own the rest. Nobody moved. Somewhere behind me a caterer's tray hit the flagstone and nobody even turned to look. On paper, I said, as of April 26th, you report to me. I let the helicopter's rotor finish its slow wind down behind me, 3 for beats, ticking like something cooling. 2 months ago, at this exact party, I said, you offered me an entry-level receptionist job at a company I already controlled. Tyler wanted to start a charity fund for the IT girl. I smiled, and I meant for it to be gentle, because gentle is worse. I just wanted you both to know how that landed. James's face had gone the color of the tablecloths, and his hand found the back of a folding chair and gripped it like the lawn had tilted under him. Behind him, the little red icon on Tyler's phone kept climbing, comments scrolling past too fast to read, strangers watching a man's face come apart in real time on a screen he'd meant to use against me. Now, Natalie, his voice cracked on the second word, and he cleared his throat, started again. And this time something oily slid into it, something I recognized from every deal story he'd ever bragged about at this exact bar. Sweetheart, this is wonderful news, honestly. This is family, this stays in the family. We should sit down, the two of us, and talk about how we... You built this entire party around humiliating my sister, Tyler blurted, phone still raised. And then his own face changed, a half-second too late, as he heard what had just come out of his mouth in front of everyone with a phone or a memory. I mean, I needed the fund for... I wasn't even going to touch what's in the account. I was going to put it back before. He stopped himself. Too late. The sentence hanging out there in front of 200 witnesses, and however many strangers were still watching on his own stream. I mean, cousin, Tyler said, weaker now, eyes flicking to his father. I meant cousin. But nobody was looking at his correction. They were looking at the first half of the sentence, and the second half nobody was supposed to hear at all, the part that named exactly whose party this had always been designed to be, and the part that named something else entirely, something about an account and putting money back that Tyler clearly hadn't meant to say out loud in front of his father in his whole life. James's mouth was still open around the word he hadn't finished when Tyler laughed. It came out wrong. Too high, a sound he'd never made before in front of 200 people holding drinks. Okay. Big picture here, Tyler said, and he stepped toward me with his palms up like a man calming a spooked horse.
Naturvidenskabelig kossen.
What if, hear me out, what if you put something into the family fund? As a gesture, we could restructure the whole Hartwell financing around Parker money instead of, whatever bank paper Dad's got sitting on it. Keep it in the family. Nobody moved. Somewhere behind him a caterer set down a tray of empty glasses, and the clink was the loudest thing on the terrace. Restructured how? I said. Just bridge financing. Short term. The trust's a little tight right now because of the Hartwell closing costs, that's all. Everybody's cash is tight after a close like that. The trust is tight, I repeated. Tyler heard himself a half-second after I did. I watched it land on his face, the same way you watch a glass tip off a counter and know, already, that there's nothing you can do before it hits the floor. James turned his head very slowly. What do you mean the trust is tight? I didn't say that. You said it right now, Tyler. Emma had been standing near the bar the whole time, arms crossed, watching the way she watches a monitor when a patient's numbers are drifting somewhere they shouldn't. She didn't rush. She walked across the flagstone at an ordinary pace, phone already in her hand, screen lit, and she held it out. Not to me first, but to James. You should look at this before you say anything else, she said. James took the phone like it might be hot. I watched his eyes move, left to right, the small mechanical scroll of a thumb. For screenshots. I already knew what they said because Emma had shown me the same 4 in her kitchen 2 hours earlier. Dates, amounts, the source account labeled JP Family Trust, The destination a checking account ending in 4471. April 14th. Then 3 more climbing, the last one 11 days before this exact party. This is your account, James said. He wasn't asking Tyler. He was asking the phone. Dad. This is your checking account, Tyler. 4471. That's your account. I was going to put it back. It's not. It's a timing thing. It's a loan against my distribution. I do it every year. You don't have a distribution this year. I moved everyone to Hartwell Equity in March. There was nothing to draw against. James's voice had gone very flat, the volume dropping instead of rising, which was somehow worse than shouting. I'd spent 34 years hearing that man perform loudness. This wasn't performance. I want to say I felt something rise in me. Standing there, some hot, satisfied thing I'd earned the right to. I didn't. I felt the opposite, a kind of stillness, watching from very far away. Emma had handed him the truth. My job was to not get in front of it. 61,000, James said, half to himself, thumb dragging back up through the screenshots. $61,000 out of my trust. He looked up, and for the first time since I'd known him, James Parker looked like a man doing math he didn't want the answer to. Where did it go? Tyler didn't answer that. He answered a different question, one nobody had asked yet. It's not what it looks like. There's a guy, it's a poker thing, it's contained. I was handling it. You were handling it with my money. Around us, the party had stopped pretending to be a party. Aunt Carol had her hand pressed flat against her chest like she was holding something in. A man I didn't recognize, someone's +1, still holding a drink with a slice of lime balanced on the rim, took 2 careful steps backward toward the hedge, the posture of a person who has realized he is witnessing something he'll be asked about later and doesn't want to be in the photo. Then the reversal started, and it was almost worse to watch than the collapse. My Uncle Robert, who 20 minutes earlier had loudly agreed that IT girls should be grateful for any opportunity at all, turned toward me with an entirely different face on. Natalie, honestly, we always knew you were the sharp one in this family. Aunt Carol found my arm. You should come by the house properly sometime. We'd love to hear more about the company. Someone I'd never spoken to in my life called me Miss Parker like it was a name he'd been using for years. I didn't say anything to any of them. There wasn't anything to say. I'd spent 5 summers learning exactly how much these people's warmth was worth, and I already had the number memorized. Gerald Voss cleared his throat instead, stepping in from where he'd been standing near the helicopter with Lucas, phone pressed to his ear for the last 2 minutes. He lowered it now. James. His voice had lost the earlier deference entirely. The board is going to need to convene on this. Officer conduct, fund commingling. If any of this touches the Hartwell close, that's not a family matter anymore. That's a disclosure matter. Lucas caught my eye across the terrace and gave a small, grim nod, the one we used at the office when a deal had just gone sideways and everyone needed to stop talking and start documenting. I nodded back. Later, I thought. Not here. James's face did something I'd never seen it do. Not anger. Not even shame, exactly. Something closer to a house losing power, room by room, until only one light was left on. He set Emma's phone down on the bar top, very carefully, like it might still go off. Natalie. His voice had dropped to something almost nobody else on that terrace could hear. Can I talk to you? Inside. Just us. The study door clicked shut behind him. He stood by the window, back to me, one hand pressed flat against the glass like he needed it to hold him up. You could have told me, he said. Before the helicopter. Before Voss. You could have called. I did call. 6 years ago. You put me at the porch table instead. He turned around. The overhead light caught the loosened knot of his tie, the sweat at his collar. This was not the man who had stood on the lawn an hour ago announcing Hartwell to a crowd of applause. You don't understand what it's like, he said, building something from nothing, watching your brother's kid. He stopped himself. Started again, quieter. Your father owes me $11,000.
Owed.
20 years ago. I never told anyone that. I could have. I never did. There it was. The thing he'd been circling since the door shut. You kept the note, I said. I kept it because it was mine to keep. You kept it because as long as it existed, you got to decide what our family was worth. He didn't answer that. I reached into my jacket and set an envelope on his desk, the same kind of envelope I'd carried into this house 6 weeks of preparation ago, except this one held something older. A single sheet, cream-colored, gone soft at the folds. His signature was on it. My father's signature was on it. A notary stamp from a law office on Milk Street that had closed in 2009. I bought it in March, I said. From the collection agency you sold the paper to in 2015 when you needed the write-off. 6% interest for years to pay off, that was the deal you wrote him. Nobody told my father you'd sold it. He still thinks you're holding it over him. James stared at the sheet like it might move. Is he going to know I bought it? He's going to know it's gone. I picked it up, gripped both edges, and tore it once, then again. The sound was small in that room. Paper, not thunder, but James flinched like I'd struck the desk. Every summer, I said, you sat me at a separate table. You called us a charity case in front of Brianna and Robert and Carol in front of caterers I didn't know the names of. I was 12. I remember the exact words. The Parkers who need help and the Parkers who don't. You said that at a table 20 feet from where I was eating alone. I was. He pressed his palm to his forehead. I was trying to keep my own children from turning out soft. I used you as the example. That was cruel. I see that now. I let the silence sit. He wasn't wrong that it was cruel. He also wasn't apologizing so much as narrating his own reasoning back to himself, looking for the version where it made sense. I'm not going to sell Hartwell back to you, I said. I'm not going to strip it either. Voss keeps his seat. I'm restructuring the retirement match for the 4,000 people on that floor, effective the next fiscal quarter, something you never once considered in 30 years of owning companies like it. You're going to run my company better than I did.
To spite me.
I'm going to run it better than you did, because that's the job. He sat down slowly, like his knees had made the decision without him. Behind him, through the window, I could see the last of the catering vans pulling out past the slate terrace, headlights sweeping the hedges. Tyler know about any of this? He asked, not looking up. Tyler's problem isn't mine to solve for you, I said. Ask Emma what's on the drive she showed me. 4 screenshots. Checking account ending 40,471. Your trust his transfers. April 14th, and again 11 days before tonight. He's been paying off gambling debts out of the family account since spring. James's face didn't move for a second too long. That's not, he wouldn't. Ask him, I said, and left him with that. I found my parents on the terrace, away from the thinning crowd, my mother's hand resting on my father's arm. He looked up before I said anything. We've known for 4 years, he said. Your mother reads the trade papers at the hospital break room. Parker Chen made Boston Business Journal in 2022. We recognized the name. You never said anything. It wasn't ours to say, my mother said. You tell us when you were ready. That's what you do, you decide things on your own time. Always have since you were small. I tore up the note. I told my father. James's copy. It's gone. He went still. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. He nodded, once, and looked out at the dark lawn instead of at me, and I understood that was as close as he'd come tonight to saying thank you. Emma caught me at the car, keys already in my hand, the gravel drive lit orange with the last of the evening. She'd changed out of her heels somewhere between the terrace and here, and she was holding them by the straps in one hand. So, she said, quiet like it was just between us. What are you going to do with all of this now? I looked back at the house, lights coming on room by room, and I only smiled, already certain of my answer. The house behind me had gone quiet by the time Emma asked her question, and I didn't answer it that night. I answered it 4 months later, in October, standing on a stretch of gravel driveway in Marshfield with a key in my hand. This is it, my father said. He was looking at the gray-shingled house past the dune grass, the one with the wraparound porch and the ramp I'd had built into the side entrance before he ever saw it, before he could tell me he didn't need one yet.
This is it, I said.
My mother had already walked ahead of him toward the water side, one hand pressed flat against her mouth. She didn't cry easily. She hadn't cried when I told her the number, and she didn't cry now, standing at a railing looking at the Atlantic instead of the parking lot of Kearney Hospital. "Natalie," my father said. He was still holding the key I'd handed him, turning it over like it might mean something different from a different angle. "Your mother worked 2 shifts a day for 11 years, so we wouldn't lose the Dorchester Street house." "I know. And now you're giving us this." "I'm not giving you anything," I said. "I'm returning something. There's a difference." He didn't argue that. He just nodded once and put the key in his shirt pocket like he was afraid of losing it and walked toward the water where my mother stood. I watched them for a moment before I got back in the car. Neither of them turned around, and I didn't need them to. I flew back to Boston that same evening, and 3 weeks later I was standing in a different place entirely, a folding table set up in the gymnasium of the same South Boston Community Center, where I'd taken the SAT twice because my family couldn't afford the retake fee the normal way, only the second time free through a program nobody in Wellesley had ever heard of. Her name was Alicia Ferreira. She was 17, from a 2-bedroom apartment on East 6th Street, and when I handed her the folder with the first Natalie Parker Foundation scholarship letter inside it, her hands were shaking the way mine used to shake around anything that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Full tuition," she said, reading it twice, the way I once read a text twice before setting a phone face down. "For 4 years. That's," she stopped. "I know what it is," I said. I did the math myself. Twice. "Why me?" "Because somebody paid my fee once and never told me their name," I said. "So, I'm telling you mine instead." There were maybe 40 people in that gym, folding chairs, a banner Emma had ordered that spelled my last name wrong on the first print run, which we'd both laughed about instead of fixing on rush delivery. I thought about a different table once, a card table on a stone terrace, plastic cutlery, the sound of real silverware from inside a house I wasn't allowed into. I didn't say any of that out loud. Alicia didn't need my history. She needed the folder, and she had it. Hartwell's numbers came out publicly at the end of that month, a small item in a trade publication, easy to miss unless you knew what you were looking for. Employee retention up. A profit-sharing structure that hadn't existed under James. Gerald Voss quoted once, briefly, about a change direction. No mention of me by name because I'd asked him not to mention me by name.
He was running it well.
That was the part that mattered. Lucas caught me reading it at my desk. "Told you it would hold," he said. "You told me it might blow up in my face." That too. Both were true. He set a coffee down next to my keyboard and left before I could argue with him about which one had turned out to matter more. Tyler's case moved slower, the way those things do. A court date set for January, his lawyer requesting a continuance. Nobody expected to be the last one. James stopped coming to family things that fall. Not banned. Just absent, in the particular way of a man who has learned that a room notices him differently now, and has decided he would rather not be in the room. Emma called me on a Tuesday in November for no reason at all, which by then had become the reason I trusted her most. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing, a patient she liked, a show she was watching, whether I should get a dog. She never once mentioned Hartwell, or the trust, or the folder full of screenshots she'd handed over in a kitchen 5 months earlier. She'd become, without either of us naming it, the person I called first. I still think sometimes about the girl on the porch, eating off a paper plate while the real dinner happened through a window she could see, but not open. I used to think the answer to that girl was a helicopter landing on a lawn, a number large enough to make a room go silent. It wasn't. The answer was smaller than that and quieter, and it took me 22 years to find it. Worth was never something my uncle had the authority to hand out. It never needed his signature. I stopped waiting for it the day I stopped setting myself on fire to keep people warm who never once offered me a seat at their table, and started building my own.